Hello and welcome to this segment of the course on Introduction to Autonomous Systems. In the last segment, we initiated the discussion on an important element of autonomous systems which are to behave like humans, and we brought in the idea of thought and intelligence as important skill set and traits that need to be incorporated in machines in order for them to become autonomous. We also tried to find some definitions for the term intelligence, and we realized that it is something which is not going to be very easy. In the present lecture, we are going to take this issue further and see if we can get better clarity about what intelligence is, how this can be defined, and whether there are going to be mechanisms by which we can incorporate these into machines so that they become autonomous. So, one fact that we have realized in the preceding discussion, that intelligence is something that we perhaps recognize when we see it, but we are going to find it very difficult to encapsulate and define in a very crisp manner. So, this is the basic problem. We can recognize it, but we cannot really define in a crisp manner. In fact, if you go to Oxford Dictionary, which perhaps is probably the closest to its generic interpretation, and calls it an ability to understand, learn and think. So, at some level we can perhaps accept this as a very generic definition and a placeholder for intelligence, which we can say is an ability to understand, learn and think. And this is probably what all of us are doing all the time. For example, if we are talking to somebody and somebody is saying something, our immediate response is, yeah, I understand now. So, it is already there as back of our mind, and learning and thinking is always there. You can say, yeah, I am thinking about doing something. So, you already have these keywords as part of your basic mental makeup, and probably this definition is which comes closest to the reasonable interpretation of intelligence. Of course, there are more complex interpretations that define the relatively decontextualized ability to reason and address new problems without context specific knowledge. It is a little bit kind of use of words which in some sense tries to represent what exactly we are trying to do, that we are essentially reasoning, or reason is something which is inherent in our intelligence, and we reason out to address new problems. Of course, there are still more interpretations of intelligence that describe it as an ability to perceive and infer information and to retain it as a knowledge, to be applied to adaptive behavior within a context. Now, this is something which you might find that it also makes lot of sense. It is an ability to perceive and infer information. That is what we are doing subconsciously. For example, whatever we are seeing at a given time or perceiving from different sensors that we have, we are inferring information. We are doing this information extraction and processing all the time in the background without even realizing that we are doing it, and to retain it as a knowledge. For example, while we are driving, if we are a passenger in a car and we are looking at the scenery around it, there is a subconscious process of looking at the building, architectures, the landmarks, and we are automatically storing that information, signboards, and the reason you realize is that next time you go along the same route, you immediately say, yeah, I know I came here last week, I saw this building. So, it is always there at all the time. A more broad based interpretation describes intelligence as capacity for abstraction, logic, understanding, self awareness, learning, emotional knowledge, reasoning, planning, creativity, dot dot dot. I mean, you can keep adding the words of similar type, similar interpretations, they will all fall under the basic category of intelligence. So, let us look at what is the possible reach of intelligence. In fact, there is a lot of research which is happening, which is trying to capture the total reach of the human intelligence. They have not been able to really complete this task, but there are some descriptions that have found general acceptance. So, in this regard, it is worth noting that from early description of intelligence as an instance of biological adaptation, so very early days, the intelligence was just treated like a biological adaptation. We now have what the psychologists call multiple intelligence scenario. The above theory attempts to explain people having different types of skills and claim that all of these skills are a manifestation of different types of intelligent behavior, which means all those skills ultimately are derived from the intelligence. So, let me show you this table. It is from a study in 1983 which was carried out by George Howard of University of Tennessee, and what this study has recorded are the 9 different types of intelligence that have been noted through various researches, various studies, investigations, experiments. So, let us look at these one by one. I mean, there is no specific order in which these have been written down, it is just some tabular representation. So, the first one we talk about as logical mathematical is the intelligence placeholder which is defined. So, it is one type of intelligence is called logical mathematical, where people essentially are very skilled in quantifying things, making hypotheses and proving them. So, all those activities that people are doing fall under the basic intelligence of logical mathematical. The people who are able to coordinate mind and body, all the sports person, athletes, where the mind and body are kind of coordinated, is termed under what is called bodily kinesthetics. The people you will find some are very good with words, they are able to write well, they are able to express their ideas much better than others. They are all having what is called a linguistic intelligence. Some people learn languages very quickly, some people find it difficult. There are people who are able to sense feelings of others, motives of other people, they have what is called interpersonal intelligence. There are people who are much better suited to differentiate sounds, their pitch, tone, rhythm, timbre. They are thought to have what is called a musical intelligence. People who understand living things and they read nature, they have what is called a naturalist intelligence. Lot of people are kind of, for example, bird watchers, people who work with the animal sanctuaries, with nature. Many people have spatial intelligence. For example, they are able to visualize the world in 3D, in paintings, in drawings. They are able to create perspective views of various 3-dimensional objects. They have this spatial intelligence. Then people who are trying to understand themselves, or they understand themselves and their own feelings and wants. They have what is called intrapersonal intelligence. And then there is one more called existential, where people who are tackling questions like why we live, die, spiritualism, philosophy of life, universe, all that comes. So, now it is not to say that these are the only type of intelligence which are there. There could be a few more which have not been researched, have not been identified, but you will find that broadly the human endeavor and the kind of societal activities that currently we are looking at, these 9 types of intelligence would essentially visible in the type of behavior that we would see in different scenarios. And that brings us to this important conclusion, that in the absence of a single clear-cut articulation of intelligence, there are also problems. I want to kind of bring out a particular instance of a bias that has also been seen in the definitions in order to suit a particular type of thought or philosophy. I mean, people can always use these kind of categorization to suit their own thought processes. So, in 1990, a book came out titled The Bell Curve. I am sure some of you would have heard about it. The bell curve itself is kind of talked about in corporate functioning and other things, kind of looking at distribution of intelligence and people who perform well, people who do not perform well. So, this book tried to find connections between race and intelligence. So, that was the kind of subject matter of the book, that is there a connection between the race and intelligence, and it suggested that you could make policy changes based on this connection, that you could make policies that recognized the connection between the race and intelligence. Now, of course, this attempt was strongly refuted subsequently by an editorial in Wall Street Journal as an op-ed. So, the editorial clearly said that there is no such connection between race and intelligence, and that to make policy changes based on this is not acceptable. So, I just want to give you extract of that op-ed on intelligence. It said that intelligence is a very general mental capability that involves the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly and learn from experience. All of that put together is what we call the intelligence. So, there is no connection between any race and intelligence. It is just an ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly and learn from experience. They also said, the editorial, it is not merely book learning, a narrow academic skill. In fact, many times we do make this mistake, that people who crack tests, we consider them intelligent. He says intelligence is much more than that. It is not a narrow academic skill or a test taking smarts that you are able to crack various tests. It is essentially ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, learn quickly, learn from experience, all of that. And it reflects a broader and deeper capability for comprehending our surroundings. For example, the terms that we commonly use and hear, like catching on, like I have caught on to this idea, I am making sense out of this situation, or I am figuring out what to do. These are what we call the intelligence. That can you figure out what to do in a given, how to solve a given problem. So, you realize that intelligence is something which is much more than many of the things that we have currently seen and discussed. Even the 9 different intelligence that we have seen, they may not be in a position to capture everything that finally what it comes down to, like catching on, making sense of things or figuring out what to do. So, to conclude this segment, human intelligence is a highly complex mix of intangibles, please note, something which cannot be quantified or which can be captured, and skills, which the multiple intelligence theory and the 9 what you call aspects that we saw, only partly it is trying to put in a structured framework. It is not doing the full justice. There will be many more things that will come up in future and which will keep on augmenting these. We will come up with newer and newer versions of intelligence. And in reality, we have to accept the fact that intelligence refuses to be categorized, and we are constantly surprised by its newer and newer forms as we continuously evolve through our struggle to manage daily life. Please note, as we evolve, as the societies evolve, countries, nations, continents evolve, even the natural world evolves, we are going to come up with and encounter different forms of intelligence, and we will have to accept all of them as being manifestation of what we call intelligent behavior or a human like intelligence behavior. So, with that we come to the end of this segment. We will continue our discussion further in the subsequent lectures. So, bye for now. Thank you and hope to see you in subsequent lectures.